Welcome everybody to Venting with Us with your girl Christelle for another episode, exciting episode. I hope you guys enjoyed the crash last week. I was just drinking my half and half lemonade. I wanted something a little bit like, not too like sweet. I don't know if I like this Lipton. We'll have to talk about it. It's not what I expected. I'm always trying something. I hope you guys liked the crash last week. Um there's just still so much more that's coming out, and you know this is a case I'm going to definitely keep my eyes out on. I also follows up, if you guys were with me at the time when I was doing Stephen Avery's story is like a crazy ass story, because the whole town, the police were just so corrupt in that case that they did not like this family. They convicted this poor man to life without parole. He's still in there. You know, um it's just you guys can go back and watch that episode. But it I was able to speak to the two original attorneys on Twitter, and this is when I was very heavily in Twitter, and they did like my comment, because certain things didn't make sense about this case. And sometimes when you have a fresher eyes on it, it's just like, well, why can't you do this? And why can't you do this? And, you know, it's just really sad, because his parents are going to be deceased by the time, if he ever even gets the chance to go and be free, or maybe this case will end up being solved when he passes away in jail. Who knows? But it's really, really sad. I also forgot to mention last week when I was talking about the crash, that Mackenzie and her mom in one of those phone calls were gloating about how, nationalized the story had become, that they were hoping that Kim Kardashian would get involved, being that, Kim does help people that were wrongfully accused. And she did end up replying. She's like, no, this is not, it's the stuff that I'm quote unquoting. But I don't handle cases like this, and whatever she had said in her quote. And that had to had like to Mackenzie, because again, this is a very absorbed girl that cannot put logic into her life that she actually committed a huge crime. And again, there's that more of that language that's going on. I really do think, and I hope and pray that somebody deep dives into this language and tries to figure out what is exactly being said, because I just have this really, really strong instinct that there's more being said in this language that people are not realizing. And so I'm hoping that somebody deep dives into that. Maybe they might find her guilty, who knows. But as I was like, researching more, I stumbled upon this story about who has not watched The Price is Right. Bob Baca. Come on, The Price is Right. Come down. You played Plinko. Remember that? Oh my God. I remember as a child watching the show and just wanting to play Plinko, where I would actually set the little, the chips and everything. And I really just enjoy that show. My grandparents enjoy that show. My mom enjoyed that show. Like that show's been on since the 1950s. It wasn't until about 1970 where Bob Baca came in and he took over the show, and he literally was it's the longest running show ever, out of all game shows. And he really, really, took that show and really made it his own. But of course, We wouldn't be talking about the show if it was all sparkly and glamorous and glitzy and all of the good things about this show. Obviously there's more behind the story than what we all knew. And it really, like, when I was watching this documentary, and you guys, if you would like to watch it, it's a two-part episode. It's on YouTube. You don't have to look for two parts. It's all in one. It's about an hour and a half. It's called Scandals, The Price is Right. And it really, really narrows down the horrific events, the sexual harassment behind the scenes, and how much Bob Barker really had control of that business. He had top people from CBS backing him up, and what people don't know, and I actually ended up finding out a lot in this documentary. And when I do my research, I'm not only watching documentaries, I'm researching, I'm looking at all different, things to go deep in, because sometimes they don't say everything in a documentary. Sometimes, even, and I've said this before, when they make movies out of the documentaries, I try to compare the two to see what they put in and what they couldn't. And obviously, a lot of the times they can't put in everything that's in a documentary, but there's also stuff that are so important, or that they throw in movies that doesn't make sense, just to give it kind of more of a hype. um they I've never This would be a fantastic movie, um which, by the way, I know I always do this because I didn't realize the reason why they don't do like these Comic-Con movies anymore is because the IP. I just recently learned this when I was looking up The Price is Right. So that's why you see all of these sequels or remakes and stuff, because it's more expensive to have the IPs than it is to create sequels and everything. You don't get your revenue back. So I thought that was interesting. I just figured I would share that with you. It was kind of like a nerd moment. But um as I was, watching this documentary, I was like, oh man, please don't let me hate Bob Barker at the end of this. Please don't let me hate Bob Barker at the end of this. And sure enough, it's really sad when people come into so much money and they feel like they have this power that they forget their humble beginnings. And it always on the back of my mind that when my life, I don't really believe that I would ever be able to, you always have to be reminded of something, you know. I was very devastated to find out the things that I did in this documentary. Um, and it shows the beginning of how The Price is Right started, and how dark after his wife, Joe, he got dark after his wife passed away. They spoke about the girls and, The Price is Right girls. And I remember I always was like, oh my God, I could do that. I can go on, this show and just be like, kind of like the Vanna White kind of thing. So, and, they showed the three main girls, Holly, Janice, and I forgot the third girl's name. They were a pair, they in the beginning, and you can absolutely see the difference from where the show started. It was very funny, very, comical, and Holly was like the number one female on the show that everybody loved. I loved Holly. She was like my all-time favorite because she was kind of more of like me, where I would do all these silly things, and she just knew how to, make that, that scene work and, make jokes and be funny and be out of the box. And, they each and every one of the girls all said the same thing. They were like, we loved our job and it was an amazing time. And then fast forward into the 1980s, the executive producer leaves, and now we have the Nepo baby come in. The one thing that I hate about jobs and people that are at the top is that they tend to forget that they have all these people that are really good at their jobs, right? And they work really, really, really hard, that they can be in these certain positions. When they have these kids that have no background, no experience, they decide to just put their kid in, which is what one of the executive producers did. He ended up hiring his son, Phil, and Phil had no experience whatsoever at being a producer, um, being on a show. But because he was a Nepo baby, he was able to come in and fit that role. Now, this happens a lot, whether if you're on television or you're in a regular office and whatnot, it's like, I'm gonna put my son there and he's gonna be but then the son becomes like a freaking demon and he's like, oh yeah, now I'm a kid in the candy store. Yeah, you know. Um it's like it's too much. Sometimes it's like, oh my god. So the girls are explaining how Phil is a pervert. Of course he would be a pervert. Like, looking at his picture, he looks like a pervert. It's like, he would, hold the girls, touch the girls inappropriately. um the girls would go back to Bob and tell them what is happening. And Bob Barker at this time, now he knows exactly that, he's famous and he's big time out there. And he just completely disregards the girls and, he doesn't want to have anything. He ends up, his wife, unfortunately, during this time, who had built his career, um, they were originally from Ohio and they moved to Los Angeles. And my right ear is ringing. Sorry. um, you know, she passes away from cancer, which is so sad. This was the love of his life. And everybody on the set, and this is producers, you have a lot of people in this interview. They all said the same thing. It felt like dark days. He was very depressed. He felt like he was going to kill himself. Um, there was just a lot of darkness because this was the love of his life. And then he took a hiatus. And then when he came back, his hair was gray. He was a completely different person. And I think this is when the monster started in him. Because what ends up happening is with these old rich men is that they have such a strong female behind them. And this is a lot of the cases. And I've worked with doctors in this case which have had the same kind of thing where, they had this strong woman. They were like really leading them in a certain path. They were, the create more of the creator part of them. They were, directing them, and they pass away. And now, they don't know what to do with themselves, the guys. So now they go into this whole, all right, I'm not married. I'm a, hump around and and now I get to be a kid in the candy store. So God, it reminds me of a 50 Cent song. So this is exactly what happens with Bob Barker. His wife passes away, and now he has a girlfriend on the side. He's starting to date one of the other women, one of the girls. And, people were saying that he had. Now, here's where I get confused on this. They said that he was having an affair, but, well, I guess you can say because he had a girlfriend, so that would technically be an affair. Yeah, okay, okay. I'm wrong. I'm wrong. Um, let me tell you something. I was having this discussion with my girlfriend the other day. We talk a lot. And I told her, I was like, I don't know. Cause she is like hungry to look for a relationship. She really wants to be just in a committed relationship. She is done with all of this. And I'm like, okay, but you haven't found anybody yet. And all the guys that you keep finding on all of these apps and everything, which I keep saying the apps don't work, but she doesn't believe me. They want to do is, they want to hump around. And it's like, so you can't have a relationship like that. Everybody's always cheating on everybody. And this is exactly what I'm talking about. Bob Barker was cheating. Ugh. He was a playboy. A lot of people on that set said that he really wanted to be like the Hugh Hefner of game show hosts, which is kind of like I could see that happening. So he did have a girlfriend. He was dating this other girl that was on the show, and you know there was a point where, she started to have a lot of special treatment because she was dating the boss. People saw her coming out of his room when they weren't taping, and it started becoming not a secret anymore. And I think this was more on her wanting to let people know, like, yeah, I'm the bitch, like I'm really like, it's me and Bob, man. It's gonna be me and Bob. Bob had a girl on the side. So Bob wasn't even thinking about you. Bob was thinking about one thing. He was like, I'm gonna put it in there and there and there. Okay. Bob was a man whore. Okay. He was not nice at all. So he wasn't. I'm telling you the truth. So now all these sexual harassment things are happening. Bob and I believe her name was Janice starts to argue um, because she ends up doing Playboy. Now, their contract specifically said that they were not allowed to be in Playboy because this was a family show. This, which obviously, it's kind of like Nickelodeon, they don't want certain things, which by all means, okay. But she did Playboy. She's like, fuck it. You're cheating on me with this chick. So, and I'm supposed to be your main woman. And she literally, and they explain this in the documentary. Okay. So I'm not making this up. She goes upstairs from Bob Barker's office and, one of the producers, one of the set people were saying to her, like, you can't speak to Bob like that. You just cannot speak to Bob like that. And she literally turned around and said, I've been sucking his dick for too long to even respect him. I don't think so. I was just like, oh, I don't want to hear how much you were sucking Bob's dick. Oh, like, oh my God. Was it wrinkly? Oh my God. Listen, if I had to suffer, you got to suffering with me. Like, I couldn't. I couldn't control it. I was like, oh, oh my God. Did he have to use Viagra? Oh, my mind is corrupt. I can't no more. It's like, no. Let's just take that in for a second. Okay. uh, oh, white man, dirty balls. It's like, oh my gosh. I can't. So Janet ends up suing Bob for sexual harassment. And now when they're in this big, huge case, and she ends up she gets fired from the show and she leaves the show. And now this is a time in about the 90s where CBS was, I'm sorry, I'm still like overly distracted by the whole sucking dick thing. It's just ugh. Um I know everybody's traumatized now. This show is not for kids this episode. But this is the time where CBS and a lot of the networks were getting more of the backlash that there wasn't this mixed culture. And we all know that The Price is Right was like really white, white, white. CBS had a lot of just, there was no international international families. There was no like, you never saw a black person, you never saw a Puerto Rican person, you never saw a Mexican, you never saw anybody else within these shows. And CBS had a lot of flack for this. So what The Price is Right did was they hired their first ever black beauty girl, is what they call them. And they had her on the show for a couple of years. She was sexually harassed. And then one day, um, it got word back to her that Bob Barker, which makes me, again, it makes me really disappointed because, you know, when you learn about these things, it's like, damn, what was he really like, when he wasn't there? Like, how was he as a human being in his home? Like, how much worse could it have been? He would, on his cards, they would have, because they had, at this time, they had to mix it up with the contestants. They would have a B, so that way, when they called the contestant, he knew that there was going to be a black person coming down. There was only two black contestants that were allowed to be on at the time of the show. So it didn't matter how many, people were in the audience. Only two were allowed to go on, and he would have it, in his cards and his cue cards. There's an episode that they show that gave me like the chills, and I was so disgusted. Where this beautiful woman she wins, and she's very excited. And he's like, oh no, please don't touch me. Get away from me. And it's very disturbing. It's very disturbing that, because prior to that, you see him hugging and people giving a kiss on his cheek. And this woman is absolutely gorgeous. And, she's an older lady and she's just very excited that she won. And, to find out that he had also stated that black people are diseased people. And he was such a racist and he was such a narcissist. Not a surprise, because you listen, old, rich, white men are generally statistically are known for this. This is not anything new. This is, and I'm not saying everybody, but there are a lot of white, rich men in Hollywood that are either pedophiles, they're narcissistic, they're racist, and they think that they are above everybody, especially when they're in power like this. What ended up happening is that then, after Janice was suing him, he wanted the three girls to defend him. And there was a huge rule, which again, this happens a lot, that they were like, no, we're not, we don't want to do that. And because they didn't want to side with Mom, they all ended up getting fired. Now, Holly, which is, she was the one that won out of it all, was, he had told her before she was let go that she had to lose weight. And she had just been put on medication, so she had gained a few pounds. And she explains this to Bob Barker. And he's like, okay. Janice ends up dropping the lawsuit because lawsuits are very expensive, especially if it's not done right away. And he comes back into her dressing room, which she said he had never done before. And he tells her, you know what? We're going to, push you for early retirement. And she's like, I don't want to go on early retirement. He's like, well, you have no choice. So she basically is pushed out of the show and she files a lawsuit against Bob Barker. And, a lot of people at first did not defend Holly on this because they were afraid that they were going to lose their jobs. And this happens a lot. A lot of people don't want to stand up for people that have been, sexually harassed, sexually assaulted, accused of, doing the right thing, but not really supporting them. And more lawsuits started coming out about sexual harassment, especially from Phil. Um, and at this point, CBS couldn't support Bob Barker. And Holly lost everything. She was like, I am determined to win this case. She ended up losing her home. She had no income coming in. She sold her house. She was living in a tent. This woman had, and I really do love the fact that she was very, very courageous to do this, because I think I would have done the same thing, knowing how right I was and knowing that, this is not what I wanted. This is what I saw on set. And it wasn't until another producer that was working at the time actually had a dressing room right next to Holly's. So she knew everything. And she joined Holly on that case. Claudia also was another beauty girl, and she was sexually harassed. And, with all of the sexual harassments and Holly ended up winning. She got everything that she wanted, including a non-disclosure agreement that she did not have to sign. And CBS basically came back and said to Bob Barker, they were like, you know what? I think it's time for you to go. I think it's time for you to retire. So at like 81 years old, that's when, before Drew Carey came in, so he didn't retire. He actually got pushed out. And this is karma coming back, because when you think you have this much amount of power and you abuse your power, and I've said this many, 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 many times on different episodes, that when your ego starts to just climb that ladder just too high and you think you are above everybody else, God has a way of coming back and saying, you know what I give you, I can always take away. And that's exactly what he did. And, he ended up dying at 99 years old. And I think a lot of people came out disclosing all of this information for the fear that, that he was going to retaliate, because he was that type of person. Like, you don't speak to this man that way. You respect him. And, it's sad that his legacy is now known for not the Bob Barker that we see on TV, but now we see him as this racist, this narcissist person that really was the worst of the worst, when he had it all, and he could have done something amazing with his life. So it just, it makes you realize that there's just a small amount of people out there that really do care, that really do take care of their people. And, there's a lot of demons in Hollywood. So, all right, guys, I hope you enjoy this show. Again, if you do want to watch The Scandal, The Price is Right, it's on YouTube. You can watch it there. It's the full 2 episodes. It's just crazy. I still like Plinko. I know that they have a life-size Plinko that you could buy. So, all right, guys. Next week we're gonna be talking about Richard Simmons. I also stumbled upon another documentary, and it's called Should I Marry a Killer? So this was a crazy, I think it was 6 parts. It's on Netflix. Unbelievable story, and the bravery of one girl who just did what she had to do because she knew that it was the right thing to do. All right, guys. I love you guys so much. Thank you for tuning in another week with me. Woo-hoo! I'll see you guys next week. Love you. Bye.